Have you ever thought about how unfair the world of Harry Potter truly is? What if one of the most tragic stories in the series was hidden in plain sight, disguised as a charming subplot? In today's video, you will find out why the history of House Elves is the most brutal and unjust tale in the entire magical universe. The Harry Potter books and movies are often seen as a light-hearted fantasy for children, and at first glance that makes sense. The early stories of the young wizard are filled with wonder, humor, and adventure. But beneath the spells and Quidditch matches, there's a darker reality, one filled with cruelty, oppression, and entire races doomed to suffering. One of the greatest injustices in the wizarding world is the fate of House Elves. So these small, peculiar creatures, draped in little more than rags, exist only to serve. Their magic is strong, yet they are forbidden from wielding wands. They live to obey, their lives dedicated to wizards who rarely show them kindness. Most fans remember Dobby, the brave and loyal elf who sacrificed himself to save Harry Potter. But his story is an exception. Most house elves live in silent servitude, bound by ancient magical contracts, never daring to dream of freedom. Where did they come from? Why are they trapped in this miserable existence? Clues scattered throughout the book suggest a tragic past. Centuries ago, something catastrophic happened to their people, something that left them desperate and vulnerable. In their time of need, wizards offered them refuge. But that kindness came with a cost. The elves, in gratitude, swore eternal servitude. What began as an act of loyalty turned into generations of enslavement. Over time, wizards grew comfortable with this power. They took the elves' magic for granted, stripping them of their rights and independence. Even worse, the elves themselves came to accept their fate. They saw freedom not as a gift, but as a punishment. A disgraced elf, one cast out by their master, felt only shame. That's the most horrifying part of their story. What could be worse than a race so deeply brainwashed that they love their own chains? Even Hogwarts, supposedly a beacon of justice, played a role in this oppression. The house elves who worked there were granted more freedom than their counterparts in noble wizarding families, but they were still forced to labor endlessly, hidden in the shadows of the castle. Yet no one seemed to care. Even kind-hearted wizards like Hagrid never questioned it.
Only one person did, Hermione Granger. She was outraged when she saw a house elf, Winky, publicly humiliated by her master, Barty Crouch Sr. That moment changed everything for Hermione. She founded SPEW, an organization to fight for elf rights, and even convinced Harry and Ron to join. But no one took her seriously. Not even the elves themselves wanted to be freed.
Some, however, played significant roles in the story, though they are often overlooked. Kreacher, the bitter and broken servant of the Black family, was used by Voldemort in one of his most sinister schemes. Remember the cursed locket hidden in the cave? Voldemort forced Kreacher to drink the poison guarding it. Later, the elf returned with his master, Regulus Black, who stole the locket and replaced it with a fake. That one act of defiance cost Regulus his life, but Kreacher never forgot. Then there's Winky, an elf who never made it into the films but played a heartbreaking role in the books. She was fiercely loyal to the Crouch family, tasked with guarding Barty Crouch Jr., a convicted Death Eater. When he escaped, Winky was cast out in disgrace. She was devastated. To her, freedom was the worst punishment imaginable. She fell into despair, drowning her sorrows in butterbeer, unable to find purpose without a master to serve. House elves were kind, hard-working, and incredibly powerful. Yet their destiny was shaped by wizards who saw them as nothing more than tools. Even in a world where magic could make anything possible, no one ever truly fought for their freedom. And that is what makes their story the most tragic injustice in the Harry Potter universe. The fate of house elves is not just an unfortunate accident of history. It is a carefully maintained system, upheld by centuries of tradition and reinforced by the indifference of wizards. Even the kindest, most progressive magical folk rarely spare a thought for the elves labouring in their homes, their schools, their government buildings. House elves don't get wages, they don't get rights, they don't even get names unless their masters allow it, and yet the wizards see nothing wrong with this. To understand the true horror of their existence, imagine a child born into servitude. An elf is not given a choice. From the moment it opens its eyes, it is trained to obey. Every aspect of its life revolves around serving a family it never chose. Unlike human slaves of the past who could at least dream of freedom, house elves are raised to fear it. An elf without a master is an elf without purpose. Some might argue that house elves are different, that they are not like humans, that their servitude is not slavery but an inherent part of their being. But is that really true, or is it just another convenient lie that wizards tell themselves? The books give us glimpses of what elves are capable of when they are not bound by their magical chains. Dobby was able to think for himself. He defied his master, made his own decisions, and in the end died a free elf. Creature, once cruel and bitter, found redemption when he was treated with kindness and respect. Even Winky, broken by her forced freedom, still had the ability to feel, to suffer, to long for something more. The tragedy is that most elves will never get that chance. They are born into a system that ensures they remain unquestioning, obedient, and content in their oppression. Even in Hogwarts, where the elves are treated better, they are still kept out of sight. The students never see them cleaning the great halls, cooking the feasts, or washing the laundry. Their labour is invisible, their suffering is silent. Consider this: if house elves were truly happy in their servitude, why did wizards need to use magic to bind them? Why were their abilities restricted? Why were they not allowed wands? The answer is obvious. Because the moment elves had true freedom, they would no longer accept their fate. Dobby was different. He had the rare courage to break free, but his story is the exception, not the rule. His fellow elves saw him as an anomaly, even as a disgrace. And yet, he was the only one who truly lived. The others, they simply existed. The way wizards treat elves speaks volumes about their society. They pride themselves on being superior to muggles, yet they carry on a system of slavery that even the non-magical world has long since rejected. They see themselves as wise and just, yet they turn a blind eye to the suffering happening right in front of them. Even the most celebrated figures of the wizarding world did nothing to change it. Dumbledore, for all his wisdom and power, never fought to free the elves. The Ministry of Magic, corrupt as it was, never made any effort to grant them rights. And what about Harry Potter himself? He showed kindness to Dobby, yes, but he never truly questioned the system. When Hermione launched her campaign, he supported her in words but did little in action. In the end, even she gave up. The resistance faded, and the elves remained where they always had been, beneath the feet of their masters. But what if things had been different? What if the elves had a leader, a revolutionary, someone who could break the cycle? What if there had been an elf like Dobby, but with the power to rally others? Imagine an uprising, a moment where the elves finally said, enough. The potential for such a rebellion was always there. House elves are immensely powerful, their magic unique and formidable. They can disapparate where wizards cannot. They can perform magic without wands. If they were not conditioned to be submissive, they could be unstoppable. And that perhaps is why wizards fear them. The laws that bind elves are not just about control. They are about survival. The ruling class always fears those it oppresses. Wizards pretend to ignore the cruelty, but deep down they know the truth. They know that if elves ever realized their own strength, They could overthrow the system in an instant. Perhaps that is why Dobby had to die. His death was a message, intentional or not. The one elf who dared to be free, who dared to think for himself, who dared to fight back, did not survive. His sacrifice was noble, but it was also a warning. And so the cycle continued. The elves of Hogwarts remained in the kitchens. The elves of noble families remained in servitude. No laws were passed, no change was made, and the next generation of wizard children would grow up, just like the last, believing that elves were simply meant to serve. The saddest part is that most readers don't even notice. The story of house elves is buried beneath tales of heroism, adventure, and magic. It is a footnote in the grand saga of Harry Potter. But it shouldn't be, because it is, in many ways, the most important story of all. It is a story about power, about control, about a society that believes itself just, yet perpetuates injustice. And it is a story that makes us ask uncomfortable questions. What other truths do we ignore simply because they are convenient? What other